We are joined today by Sir David Hare, a celebrated contemporary playwright who's written more than 30 plays and more than 25 screenplays, including 2 Oscar-winning films. Where did the inspiration to write come from?
Well, I was born in a very boring town. I was born in a small suburban seaside town in England, in Sussex, a town called Bexhill, and it had the oldest average age of any town in the country. And so if you were young and lively in Britain in the 1950s, there was absolutely nothing to do in the town. And that is a classic writer's background, to come from a place where you really have to make your own entertainment and get into the wonderful wide world. And so not only did I depend on my imagination, but it's also meant that, I'm now nearly 70 and I'm still deeply curious about the world, because I was born into a place that was so dull. And everywhere I go seems interesting and exciting because it's not the town I was born in.
Am I right in then understanding that it was born out of a need to create an alternative world for you?
It's certainly, fantasy was a very powerful part of my childhood, that's true. But I never dreamed of becoming a writer until it never occurred to me to become a writer. I studied literature at university, but it never seemed to me that I was someone who was going to write literature. But then when I was running a theatre company, it literally happened. I was the director of the theatre company, and a playwright let us down on a Wednesday, and we had to have something to start rehearsing the following Monday. And so I wrote a play. And I always say to everybody, you should try it, because you should see you may have a gift inside you for whatever it is. Try things, because you may discover a gift that you didn't know you had. And when I discovered I could write plays, I was genuinely amazed. I had absolutely no sense of it before I did it. And when I found it, it was the most joyful thing in my life.
And when did you realize that you could also write films?
Films, I had always loved films. And you must remember that I was born at a time when cinema was really the most important medium in Europe. There were all these great filmmakers, Ingmar Bergman, Federico Fellini, Antonioni, Louis Malle, Jean-Luc Godard. They were not just artists, but they were at the very front of European thought. If you wanted to understand what people were thinking about in Europe, you had to watch these films.
Right.
Position that cinema then held as being the most intellectually vital form, unfortunately, it has rarely held since. It just happened to be a period of very great men and women making wonderful films, Agnes Varda. But of course, I loved cinema when I was a child, and I always wanted to be able to write films, but it took me a very long time to learn how to do it.
How far has your writing been influenced by the world around you?
Oh, completely. I'm not a writer who is entirely influenced by other writers. I don't have any literary influences. My influence has always been the world and what I see going on in the world and my reaction to it. And so I look at subjects, perhaps, that nobody else considers worth writing about. I've written a play about aid to the third world. I've written a play about privatization of the railways. I've written plays about the diplomatic process leading up to the invasion of Iraq. I've written plays about the Chinese Revolution, and these are all subjects that are apparently very off-putting. In other words, they're subjects that people think, oh, I don't want to see a play about that. It sounds boring. Right. Whereas they've always been subjects that I have believed I could make interesting. And, at the moment where everybody is asking me to write a play about Donald Trump, I say, no, I have no interest in writing a play about Donald Trump. It's too obvious.
Right.
What I like to write about is subjects that people don't realize are interesting, but I can make interesting. The Church of England I wrote about, and I wrote a serious play about vicars and priests in the Church of England. And this is a subject that absolutely nobody had touched at all. And so I've always claimed a certain prescience, an ability to see something that will become interesting over the years, and I will be one of the first people to get to it. And that's an instinct I have that has been my principal characteristic as a writer, I suppose.
All right, since you talk about making a subject interesting enough to pull audience, Do you see that actors actually play a crucial role in that project?
Yeah, Nicole
You had
Kidman
and
Kate Winslet both won Oscars for the roles they played. But that is because I used to be a director in the theatre. And so I'm very conscious of what the actor's experience is going to be like. So as a playwright, I try to write, and as a film writer, I try to work roles that are worth playing. In the theatre, write plays where people just have 3 lines or 4 lines. They come on, they say something, then they have to go off. Because my heart is with that actor who's got to sit there all evening from 7:30 to 10:30, and all they've got to do is come on and say 3 lines.
Right.
It's more satisfying for the audience, it's more satisfying for the actor if the part is worth playing. Yes, specialized in writing the kind of role that actors want to play. But the crucial thing to say about this is that when I wrote The Reader, for instance, then that part of the concentration camp guard who is illiterate but who learns to read, actresses who read that role said, whoever plays this part will win the Oscar. And I said, absolutely not. It will only be won by a great actress. I didn't win the Oscar for Kate Winslet. Kate Winslet won herself. Nicole Kidman won her Oscar. And so when actresses come to me and say, can you write me an Oscar-winning role? The answer is no. I can't write an Oscar-winning role because you will only win an Oscar if you're a great actress.
What do you prefer, working with a young crew or a seasoned one?
There are some actors that I've worked with over and over again. Judi Dench, I've worked with a lot. All the important actors in my life, Meryl Streep, Julianne Moore, Nicole Kidman. I'm about to work again with Carey Mulligan.
Oh, I know.
You know, these people, I find the second time, the third time you work with them, it's wonderful because you start at a level where you know each other. So much of working on a film or a play is getting to know people. And of course that can be very rich, but it can also be extremely time-consuming when you both are trying to learn how to work. But somebody like Bill Nye, in particular, I've now worked with Bill Nye 10 times. Tom Wilkinson was just in a film that, and I've probably worked with Tom 5 times. Rachel Weisz, I've now worked with 3 times. And I find this thing of coming back to actors raises your game.
How exposed are you to the non-European cinema and theatre scene?
You know, it is very difficult because by and large, English-speaking films are the films that are shown in London. The number of art cinemas that show films from abroad gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So all I can do is comb through the television streaming channels and see what I can find of foreign films. But I couldn't pretend to, except by going to film festivals, to know as much about what's going in the non-English speaking cinema as I do about the English-speaking cinema.
Do you see a possibility of a collaborative venture with any of the Indian playwrights or filmmakers?
I've been coming to India since 1981. I wrote a play in 1982, A Map of the World, which was set in the Taj Hotel in Mumbai. And then similarly, I adapted Catherine Boo's book, Behind the Beautiful Forevers. And that was a play which was shown at the National Theatre and which was then shown in cinemas all over the world for one night only as a filmed version of a play. It was seen in cinemas. And I'm very, very proud of that. In other words, the idea that we had an all-Indian company of 24, 25 actors at the National Theatre and that play was then seen all over the world, that's been one of the most satisfying things I've done.
Let's talk about your autobiography. Is it as self-critical as you usually are of your own art and writing? Completely.
And you know, some people who read the book recognize the emotions in the book that I describe. You know, it was a big struggle for me to establish my work. It was not liked by the critics at the beginning, and I felt very embattled. And my 20s were very, very hard times for me. And so I became a not very pleasant person, I think, because I had to fight so hard for my work. And I conformed to the stereotype of the ruthless artist who will do anything in order to see their idea of what they want their work to be realized. And when I describe in the book the self-hatred that brings about, some people say, oh, I can't believe you suffer from that degree of self-hatred. And my response to that is to say, if you don't suffer from self-hatred, good for you. You're a very lucky person. But those of us who do recognize each other, and I think one of the reasons the book is so liked by some people is that I hope I am completely honest about those darker emotions in myself as much as in anyone else.
What is your advice to the younger generation of playwrights and screenwriters?
Get your play on and do it yourself. Just if the theatre won't do your play, do it yourself. Just put it on. Doesn't matter where you put it on. Put it on in a room like this. Put it on anywhere. Just get it on. And you will only learn by seeing your play performed. Being an unperformed playwright, you are never going to learn anything about playwriting until you sit with an audience and see what they respond to, what they don't respond to, what they like and what they don't like. You will learn so much about your own work. But unfortunately, unlike a novelist, you will only learn it when it is done in the way which you want, namely by actors and in front of an audience.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
speaking to us.